Ghost of Tsushima never needed a morality system, and it was only expected because of Sucker Punch's previous titles, although it was ironic that their new game was about choosing a path between light and dark, but they never capitalized on it. This is a shame, because it certainly could have been interesting to see Jin evolve to a more stealthy build or a more combat-oriented build, based on the gameplay decisions that you made. But that would create tonal inconsistency, as Ghost of Tsushima tells a linear story, so it doesn't matter what decisions you make in the gameplay when the story doesn't treat your actions any differently, aside from the ending of course, but we'll get there. While Infamous splits its story into two diverging paths based on the decisions you make, I do applaud Sucker Punch for feeling ambitious and confident enough to tell a story that they wrote and want the player to experience. I'm throwing shade here, but there are some games where it feels like a branching narrative is just an excuse for a writer not having the chops to tell a good interactive linear narrative and gives options so the player can only blame themselves if the story sucks. But this linear storytelling approach in Ghost of Tsushima causes there to be a significant departure from the gameplay and story. Most humans are good people, and will often choose the morally correct option when playing a branched narrative game. We can see this when studios like BioWare release the percentage of choices for their Mass Effect games. So in Ghost of Tsushima, it stands to reason that most players will be choosing to engage the enemy head-on, as that would be the right thing to do, and it's what Jin himself wants to do at the beginning of the game. This means it's hard to justify a rift forming between Jin and his uncle, when 90% of the time, Jin is doing the honourable thing, and his uncle is painted as unreasonable in the player's mind when he won't overlook minor assassinations when compared to the bodies piled up during duels. So unfortunately, this means Sucker Punch has to manufacture reasons for Jin to act dishonourably, with no input from the player in order to create conflict between Jin and his uncle, and this is where the narrative suffers. We're so used to having the choice between good and evil affect the story in Sucker Punch games that when a similar concept is presented to us but it doesn't give us control, it feels like the game is taking away control when it never actually gave it to us. Now, it's not just Sucker Punch that would have this issue. This segregation of gameplay and story would be criticized by any studio. It's just so ironic coming from the studio that built its name off the moral decisions affecting the narrative of the game, and it feels so strange to have all that power seemingly taken away from us. I also feel that this moment when we poison the Mongols is going to be a much more effective moment in the upcoming adaptation of the game, as we won't be in control of Jin, so it won't matter if it's not the decision we would make. This is what the frustrating thing about this moment is. If we were playing the game as a heroic samurai, then agreeing to poison the Mongols is such an out-of-left-field decision for our Jin to make. Even though Ghost of Tsushima isn't an RPG, it still has the essence of a branching narrative. But once again, I'm proud that Sucker Punch felt they were confident enough in their storytelling that they could give us an entirely linear story and didn't have to rely on player choice to add to their narrative, which, while a technique exclusive to interactive media, does mean you didn't have a clear vision for your project. Unlike the goddamn ending that throws away all the hard work and effort for a cheap choose-your-own ending that's utterly meaningless because there's no way that both endings are canon. I'm sorry, I just can't get over how bad this ending is, undercutting what might be the most emotional and high-stakes boss fight I've ever seen with a shock value choice that means nothing in the long run. If you were doing an Infamous, and I got to make these decisions for Jin throughout the campaign, then this moment would have all of the guttural impact intended, even if they decanonized one ending for the sequel. But randomly throwing this moment into the final moments of the game without setting it up means that they weren't confident in the ending at all. They had to give the player a choice and then come up with which one felt better when they started developing the sequel. You can't have Jin go through this deeply personal character journey across the whole game, making choices on his own, even if the player doesn't agree with them, just to chicken out at the crescendo of his arc and let the player decide what kind of samurai you're going to be. Wasn't the whole point of getting rid of the morality system because you had a vision for who Jin was, and wanted to tell a story instead of the player making an inferior one on their own with the choices you give them. Do you not remember what a powerful ending The Last of Us had, where it doesn't matter what the player thinks is right? This is Joel's story. He's taking back his baby girl, and he has to kill that doctor. No moral choice, just a confident story that is still praised as one of the best this industry has seen. Ghost of Tsushima didn't need a morality system, but Sucker Punch should have done one of two things. Give the player more decisions to make that affect the outcome of the narrative, falling back into their infamous games, or just have the confidence to end their gorgeous sweeping saga with a decisive moment that solidifies Jin as the ghost or samurai that they envisioned him to be.